Shot in 1914, this image captures a firing squad during the Mexican Revolution. Newspapers spread it across the border, heightening fear. It endures as a harsh reminder of how quickly due process collapsed into violence. Indigenous families stand between two soldiers, prisoners in their own land. These communities resisted displacement for years. Mass arrests like this show how the conflict hit civilians first. A quiet picture that says everything. Crossed ammunition belts and a steady gaze turned Pancho Villa into an international symbol. Reproduced worldwide, the portrait fused folk hero and feared commander, capturing the charisma that drew recruits and alarmed rivals. Cavalry from the División del Norte and the Ejército del Sur rides down the capital's main avenue. Sombreros, uniforms, and rifles filling the street. For a brief moment, Villa and Zapata's forces shared the city. The alliance was short, but this image made it unforgettable. Inside the National Palace, Pancho Villa sits in the president's chair, while Emiliano Zapata leans beside him, packed in by soldiers and civilians. The scene was deliberate theater. They'd taken the capital but had no wish to keep it. A brief triumph, frozen in one crowded room. Villa stands center, flanked by dorados in wide sombreros and crossed bandoliers. Mismatched jackets, Mauser rifles, and heavy cartridge belts reveal an army forged from ranch hands and miners. Their rigid stance and stare project discipline and speed. Villa rides at the head of a dusty column on his famous horse Siete Leguas. Behind him, cavalry and supply wagons stretch across the road, throwing up grit. The image sums up his strategy, mobility and surprise, raids that hit fast, slipped away, and kept the North in motion. Under an old archway, a mounted Mexican revolutionary poses with a rifle, crossed cartridge belts, a coiled lariat, and an ornate saddle signal life on campaign. Horsemen like him served as couriers, scouts, and shock troops. A group of rebels crowds around a wheeled improvised cannon, rifles slung, and cartridge belts across their chests. When arsenals ran dry, they built their own artillery to break sieges and hold roads. Crude, risky, and effective. He sets his sombrero on the saddle to pull enemy fire. Crouching under the horse, he shoots back from cover. Staged or real, the tactic shows how fighters improvised in open country, using any protection they had to survive, then strike back. Soldiers pose with rifles while women, and even a child, sit among them. Campaigns rarely moved alone. Families cooked, carried loads, treated wounds, passed messages, and sometimes fought. This picture folds the front line and home into the same frame. Rebel fighters stand with rifles while women sit in front, wrapped in rebozos. Columns often traveled like this. Partners cooked, carried supplies, treated wounds, relayed messages, and at times fought. The frame collapses home and front line into a single camp. On the steps of a monument in Ciudad Juarez, women in sombreros and cartridge belts pose with rifles, flanked by men and two boys. A handwritten caption on the photograph identifies the gathering as a reception for General Rabago. Mexico's mounted rural police enforced quick, visible order outside the cities. Two rurales in charro-style uniforms, carbine slung, cartridge belt tight, lariat coiled. Feared and admired, they symbolized the old order the revolution would soon unravel. Mexico's rural police stand in a straight line, wide-brimmed hats casting shadows, carbines at their sides. Their neat uniforms projected reach and speed outside the cities. Symbols of an old order the revolution would soon unravel. Pancho Villa stands between Mexican General Álvaro Obregón, left, and U.S. General John J. Pershing, right, during a border meeting in El Paso, Texas. A rare moment of uneasy cooperation. Behind Pershing stands a young George S. Patton. Cardenas's portrait is tied to the killing that shocked Mexico during the 10 tragic days. For many, his face came to represent betrayal and the collapse of fragile democracy. The photo survives as a reminder that coups have authors as well as outcomes. Pancho Villa leans in a doorway, sombrero on, a striped sirop over his arm. His wife stands beside him, steady-eyed. Taken just months before his assassination, the photo shows the private calm behind a public legend and makes what followed feel even closer. Municipal Chief Manuel Asunsolo turns the city over to Emiliano Zapata as men crowd the platform in mixed civilian suits and cartridge belts. Handovers like this mark the collapse of old authority, proof of how quickly local power shifted during the uprising. Municipal Chief Manuel Asunsolo hands Cuernavaca to Emiliano Zapata as men crowd the platform in suits, sombreros, and cartridge belts. Transfers like this showed how fast authority could flip during the Mexican Revolution. A vast mounted column fills the field, sombreros, rifles, and a few flags to the horizon. Most were peasants turned soldiers under Zapata's command. Their cause, land seized by big estates. Their banner, Tierra y Libertad, land and liberty. Pancho Villa stands at center in a light tunic, flanked by commanders and civilian advisors in suits and wide-brimmed hats. The mix of uniforms and street clothes shows how fluid rank and resources were. Strategy was argued face-to-face, then tested on dusty fronts. Revolutionary officers pause over coffee at Sanborns on Avenida Madero, sombreros low, bandoliers still on, cups in hand. Identified as Generals Feliciano Polanco Araujo and Teodoro Rodriguez, the scene shows war colliding with city routine. Cananea, Mexico, 1906. From a car hood, the mine owner addresses strikers while armed men ring the crowd. The clash turned deadly and news raced across the border. Years before the war began, this strike became widely remembered as an early spark of the Mexican Revolution. Children line a wooden porch beside their teacher in the copper mining town of Cananea. The scene feels ordinary, books and worn boots. Yet it was taken around 1906 labor strike, often remembered as an early spark of the revolution. A small group poses beside a canvas tent, hats and sashes neat, faces steady. Taken during years of conflict and forced removals, the portrait shows dignity amid disruption. The camera preserves people policy tried to erase, presence as quiet resistance. Leaders stand beneath a shade structure, scarves at their throats, one man at center with a holstered revolver. Records identify the scene as a peace meeting near Ortiz. Treaties promised an end to raids and removals, but the calm proved fragile. 7 village fighters posed before a painted studio backdrop, wide sombreros, cartridge belts, boots. At center sits Refugio Sanchez, a local commander, a carbine across his knees. Images like this preserve the small-town leaders who kept the Southern movement alive. A tight close-up, the famous mustache, steady eyes, and a white scarf knotted at the neck. Reprinted in papers and posters, this photograph helped turn a field commander into an emblem of Tierra y Libertad, the demand for land and dignity. After the ambush at Chinameca, Zapata's body was displayed in Cuautla for identification. Crowds gathered as officials tried to prove he was dead. The photo meant to end rumors, instead made him a martyr of the Mexican Revolution, a symbol of Tierra y Libertad.